This is Matt Weaver alongside Andy Marquis, and we are heading up to the Martinsville, Virginia is for Racing Lovers 300. It is the big NASCAR All-Americans weekly series late model event running at, I say the big track, but it's only a half mile. It's one of the smaller tracks that NASCAR sanctions, but it's big in terms of stature. This is a really, really big deal. This is my first Martinsville late model race, and we're going to shoot a video here on the way up to Martinsville. Very picturesque scenery, the mountains in Virginia, and we're going to talk a little bit of late model racing. Again, this is my first year. I've been fortunate enough to have Race 22 come in and ask to have me involved and bring some of my late model knowledge to the race this year. I don't know how much of that I can say that I brought, but I'm having a blast. I'm having a fun time talking racing. Andy, I know that you've been talking about this race for a year now, saying that I need to come, and finally it's race day morning. How do you feel?
It's a Super Bowl, man. This is Super Bowl Sunday right here.
Now, obviously this race is still relatively young. When people talk about late model racing of any kind, whether super late model, stock pro late, whatever, there are some races that have a little bit longer tenure, whether it's the Snowball Derby or Winchester or the All-American. This race is still relatively young. I think you've told me that the first year was what, 88?
82.
82, okay. So, yeah, it's older than I am. I'm not that old. I'm still 24. But a little bit older than I am. Still relatively young, but still storied nevertheless. It drew 89 cars this year. I know there's been some years where it's drew 120 cars. But still a very solid car count of about 90. The format this year is a little bit altered. Instead of your standard one car at a time trial, you have European style, and we did that yesterday. And Chad Fincham is your not pole sitter, but he is your fastest qualifier for today's festivities. Now what they're going to have today is they're going to have 4 heat races, right? Each one is 20 laps.
20 laps, and then last chance 20 lapper.
Yeah, and then there's going to be a last chance race, and that's going to set the field of 42. And so you've got 90 cars, or 89, 90 cars, who are essentially having to race their way into a 42 car field. There are no provisionals, something we're going to get into over the course of the next 10 minutes. It is just, race your way in or go home. And I think it's the purest form of motorsports ideology in regards to this race. It pays 25 grand to win. Obviously you get the NASCAR sanctioning. It's Martinsville. All these factors come together to create what's really become one of the big signature events in motorsports. And before we continue on that, just check out this scenery. This is Martinsville, guys. This is Virginia. This is the Virginia mountains. It doesn't get any more real than this. This is just absolutely beautiful. This is one of the reasons why I love shooting these style of videos when I'm going to the racetrack, because the thing that I've noticed in living and racing is that for the most part, tracks are usually built in some of the best locations, because you can't build a racetrack right in the middle of the city. There are a few examples, and for the most part they've struggled as we've gotten into the modern times. I think about Fairground Speedway Nashville or Milwaukee, and there are curfews and the people don't support it anymore. So for the most part, for a track to be successful, traditionally, you've had to build it, deep in the countryside, and that's certainly the case for Martinsville. And so I just wanted to show you guys this on the way up to the track today. But moving back towards the race, like I was talking about before, this is the purest form of racing. You've got a huge field. You've got guys who are trying to race their way in, big purse. Beyond those reasons, Andy, is there any other reason that this race has become a huge deal in the late model landscape over the last 10 to 15 years?
Well, the thing you have to remember first is the perimeter late model stock car racing really didn't come around until the All-American Series came around in the 80s. When Dickie Gore started this late model stock car racing division, the former promoter up at Old Dominion Speedway, he started this style of racing. So this race has been around ever since this form of racing has been around. So you've got, so this has been there since the beginning. It's been one of those races. They used to come here twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year. But this has been around since the beginning of this style of racing, and it's just become late models Super Bowl. Now they come here once a year. It'd be nice if they came twice a year, but they come once a year, and it's, you know, it's Martinsville Speedway. It's the oldest track in, certainly on the NASCAR Sprint Cup Tour, one of the oldest tracks in all of NASCAR.
It's been around since the beginning. So we brought up the entry list earlier. We've got 89 cars who are going to race their way for the 42 starting spots. Your 4 fastest qualifier, your 4 pole sitters for the heat races are Chad Fincham, Deke McCaskill, Peyton Sellers, Ron Stilner. So you've got some pretty heavy hitters up there. But one of the things that we saw yesterday in qualifying is that you have some really fast guys, some drivers that you thought would be a little bit quicker who are going to start middle to the back of the pack, and it happened for a variety of reasons. It was a really warm day. Again, this is only my 4th time in Virginia, but Andy tells me that it's usually not as hot as it has been this weekend, and it was really humid yesterday. And so the guys who went out earlier in the session were able to pull off quicker times than those who went out last. The sun got even hotter, the track got slicker as guys laid down rubber. It stayed warm, and the guys were just saying it was really slick out there. You had a few guys who went out, they had some cloud cover early on as well, and that's that changed the complexion of where we thought everyone would stand. Some of your typical front runners are not in the top 5. Are defending now 2-time NASCAR All-American Weekly Series champion. Lee Pulliam is your 8th quickest qualifier. The NASCAR Truck Series driver, Timothy Peters, is running this race in a one-off. We got him 10th on the running order. C.E. Falk, who, for those of you who aren't familiar with the late model racing outside of what you see on TV, C.E. Falk was the guy who was leading on the last lap at Daytona in the Battle of the Beach and was turned on the last corner by Kyle Larson. So that's a familiar name. Usually fast, top driver in this form of racing. He's 14th. Ben Rhodes is 16th, one of the top drivers last year. I can go down the list. Point is, there are a lot of fast guys who are starting deep in the field, and that's important because, again, these heat races are 20 laps. You've got one chance to get in, then you have your last chance. So technically 2 chances to try to make this race. But if you're in a transfer spot, if you're running anywhere from 5th to 8th and on back, I have legitimate concerns just from what I've been told about this race that you may not escape with your equipment intact. Is that what you've seen with this race in the few years you've been covering it, Andy?
Well, last year they ran these this new heat race format, and it was actually surprisingly clean. The last chance race, if I remember, either only had 1 caution or it went wire to wire. But last year there was also a lot of concern about it was a new format, and there was a lot of concern about the heat race, and everybody was kind of being careful. It's kind of like when NASCAR goes to a new road course, and everyone's worried about there's going to be a big wreck in turn 1, and you end up having a remarkably clean race because everyone's being driving more cautiously. It was kind of that way last year, so we didn't really have the wreck fest. I think this year though we could, because you've got guys that we certainly didn't expect to be up front. I mean, I don't think anyone expected Chad Fincham to set the fast lap. He's going to be good. We all knew he'd be good here. We didn't think he'd set the fast lap. Ryan Stiltner, nobody, not even Ryan Stiltner saw that one coming. So, you got some, and then you got some good cars deeper. You've got Ben Rhodes. He's going to be a factor in the race if he makes it in, and he should. So it's going to be different because you're going to have real comers and goers. Last year we really didn't have that. The top guys started up front, and this time that's not the case with these heat races. And for some of those guys, you can't just ride around in the heat races now. You gotta go for it. I mean, no provisionals. I mean, if something were to happen to Lee Pulliam in a heat race or in a last chance race, I mean, he's not going to be in the race.
Which, that's a perfect segue, because that was my next topic, is with so many fast guys starting near the back because of where they qualified, you've got the real potential now for some shenanigans to take place, some accidents certainly. And so one of the hot topics that we were debating in the media center yesterday, excuse me for a moment, we're going down this mountain. My ears are popping. I can't even hear myself talk right now. Welcome to the mountains of Virginia, everybody. Okay, sorry about that. Again, we were talking about the possibility for, or the discussion of should the Martinsville 300 have a series of or a pair of guaranteed starting spots, provisionals for certain drivers. I think it was me and Corey, right? Corey
and Tony Stevens.
Yeah, Tony Stevens was in the debate. I think Corey's argument was, and I think I initially sided with him, is that the race needs some guaranteed starting spots for deserved drivers, and the number that I personally set was 2. I do think that with a field of 42, you should reward 2 drivers for their exceptional performance over the course of the past year. I think it should come down to your previous champion, your NASCAR All-American Series champion, in this case Lee Pulliam for the last 2 years, and your defending race winner Philip Morris. And if for whatever reason in these heat races they get taken out, they get trashed, they get spun out, no matter what happens, they have a guaranteed spot to fall back on, because you could certainly make a case that they deserved it. And from a promotional standpoint, I know a lot of people are certainly frustrated with the success that Lee has experienced over the past 2 seasons, and he's won everywhere. He's had bounties placed on him. It's become the Lee Pulliam show wherever he goes. But at the end of the day, he's still a star, and you want your top drivers at your top races. Same thing with Philip Morris, former champion, former winner of this race, the defending winner of this race. And so an argument could be made that you want those guys to be locked in for the fans' sake. Now, on the other hand, and I certainly understand this too, and I think this is the side that you come from, Andy, and we'll let you explain this in a second, is that the beauty of this race under the current format is there are no single car time trials. It comes down to racing. You get to race in the European style qualifying session, you get to race in the heats, you get to race in the last chance race. So for you to make the top race in this discipline, you've got to race your way in. And if for whatever reason you can't survive, you can't win, you can't get to the front in enough time, then you don't race in the main. And it's kind of like the Indianapolis 500, where the fastest 33 of that race make the race, regardless of whether you were back in the split with CART or IRL or 26 and whatever the number was. My math is terrible. So I understand, I think, your camp, Andy, where you want the fastest guys to be in the race, and you don't want guys who have something to fall back on and can just kind of rest in their laurels in the heats, right?
I wouldn't say I wouldn't want provisionals. I think if you do provisionals, I'd be okay if you had a national champion or a state champion provisional, or if the nearby tracks had provisionals, but I'm not, I wouldn't be totally against it. I've just never been a fan of provisionals. I think that the fastest 43 car should be